So the marathon swimming, it's one thing to be able to swim, but I'd say that's 25% of the issue. You need all sorts of psychological tricks to keep you in the water. Because as soon as you touch the boat, if you touch the support boat,
you're finished.
You're finished.
Yeah.
It's over.
Ross Youngman thrives on challenges. At 52, he became a marathon ocean swimmer, joining only 300 people worldwide to complete the Triple Crown of ocean swimming. Today, Ross refuses to be defined by his age.
But, you know, it's a great sport because we put our togs on, we get in the water, whether you're 60 or 25, you just split based on speed. Yeah. And it's really uplifting because the young people don't want to hear about your aches and pains. No. You can't go and say, gee, the back's hurting today. They've got zero interest. And, you know, they reach out, they want help with their careers, they want help with their swims. So it's this sort of symbiotic relationship, even with life and business and all those sort of things. People talk about ageism. I believe that what you present and how you attack life and think about life has an effect on the people around you. If you convince yourself that you're 50 and you're never going to get another job because you've been made redundant, or you know you're too old for this or whatever, you know you already talked yourself out of it. I don't want it to invade my head, and you know we control what goes through our head.
From our studio in Jones Bay Wharf, Sydney, here's Pod O'Sullivan with Don't Let the Old Man In, a podcast from the Wisdom Vault.
Welcome back to another episode of Don't Let the Old Man In. Today's conversation is one that I was genuinely excited about from the moment I heard the story of my next guest. Why? Because it touches on something so many of our listeners grapple with, and that is the question of what's possible in the second half of life. We live in a culture that often treats aging as a process of decline, a slow retreat from ambition and achievement. But his story completely dismantles that narrative. Here's a bloke who walked away from competitive swimming at age 10. Yes, 10. But he kept it as a modest hobby for decades, and at age 52, after a few drinks and some banter with old school buddies, he decided to swim the English Channel as part of a relay group. Ross Youngman is a marathon swimmer, former CEO of an investment fund, and now the CEO of the General Sir John Monash Foundation. Now, for those who don't know, the John Monash Foundation is similar to the Rhodes Scholarship Foundation or the Fulbright Scholarship Foundation in the US. At age 64, Ross has achieved what most would consider impossible. He's completed 4 separate Triple Crown swimming challenges. This is open ocean swimming challenges, becoming one of only 300 people worldwide to complete the prestigious Triple Crown of open water swimming. That's the English Channel, the Catalina Channel, and the Manhattan Island. And he did all of these 3 in just 102 days. Along the way, he's raised over $500,000 for Indigenous education and other charities, whilst completing a Master's in Coaching Psychology degree. But this conversation is not really about swimming. That's a metaphor. It's about reinvention. It's about purpose. It's about choices, and the choices we make in midlife that determine whether we expand or we contract. In our conversation, we explore how a childhood decision to walk away from elite swimming at 10 taught Ross the importance of self-awareness and listening to his own signals rather than external pressure. We talk about why social connection is proving to be more powerful than physical training in sustaining his marathon swimming career, and how this mirrors other research on successful aging. We talk about the deliberate career transition from high-stakes finance to purpose-driven philanthropy, and what this teaches us about designing the second half of life. And finally, we talk about why doing a master's degree in coaching psychology revealed to him his own patterns, his stubbornness, his backup behaviors that he developed over 6 decades, and he recognizing that a glass 3/4 full attitude is not toxic positivity, it's actually a conscious choice where to direct limited energy. After the episode, I'm going to share with you some reflections and one experiment to play with. Ross, let's start here. In fact, let's start a long time ago. You, in inverted commas, retired from competitive swimming at age 10 in Tasmania. What made you walk away at that age?
Well, I don't know. I think I had some self-awareness of the fact that, you'd get up twice a day. I'd go to an open air pool in Launceston. At 5 o'clock, it was dark, cold air. And I'd be doing this twice a day at sort of from 8 years old. And I think I got to 10 and I had a little bit of success under 10. And then there was a jump. You didn't have an under 11, you had an under 12. So, you've got 2 years of banging around against older kids, more physically stronger. And I remember thinking, I don't really want to do this anymore. And I had a conversation with my father, who was, as often parents do, quite into my swimming career at the time. And we agreed that I would step back from it and just focus for a short period every year on my high school swimming. And that was it. But, I didn't suffer from burnout and I was able to keep going.
What would that 10-year-old think of what you're now doing, which will come too soon, but you're doing something dramatically bigger and longer than that 10-year-old was doing? Yeah,
I think that would have been exciting because at the time, there were swimming heroes like Shane Gould, we would look at the Olympians that were going off. I can remember, the 72 Munich Olympics quite clearly for a variety of reasons. Obviously, it was quite tragic. But also, Des Renford was a great role model for us as probably the pioneer open water swimming in Australia at the time.
Because that was a new sport then, wasn't it?
Well, long distance open water swimming. I mean, the concept, one thing I'd say at 10, the concept of me as an older person swimming the English Channel would have been completely foreign to me. Yeah. And I think even, right up to, my mid-50s, it would have been completely foreign to me.
Talk us through then what happened at the mid-50s, right? Because I misunderstood initially. I thought you stopped swimming full stop and then took it up. But indeed, you kept it going at a normal level in terms of dipping the pool 2 or 3 times a week. But then you jumped right big in the deep end, literally. What happened there and why?
Well, I think what happened was that, when I was at the University of Tasmania, I was living in Sandy Bay, Battery Point, a beautiful suburb, in a share house, and there were 4 of us in the house. 3 of us were captains of our high school swim teams. So, fast forward about 40 years and 30 years, we're sitting up in North Stradbroke Island where one of the guys had a holiday home, having a dinner. Alcohol was involved. It was sort of early in the morning, somewhere between that 1 and 3 in the morning probably. A little bit overconfident maybe, and we decided that we would go to the English Channel in the spirit of our hero Des Renford and do a relay on the English Channel, which is...
And how old were we then?
Well, that was sort of 2013, so let's say 52.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And from a distance perspective, how long is that?
Well, you swim, it's the same distance. You've got to get from England to France, but one person swims for an hour, then the next person gets in for an hour, and then the next person. So I ended up swimming for 4 hours in 4 different goes. Yep. And we got there in about 11 and a half hours. Okay. And I guess you swim about 12 kilometres.
Okay.
So it was a bite-sized step up.
What changed for you after that? Like, you obviously drank the Kool-Aid and kept drinking.
Well, I really enjoyed going. I went into a distance swimming squad in Sydney 6 months before this to start preparing for it. And, I started mixing with other swimmers who'd done other things in the long distance space. There was people there that had, done the English Channel, and there's an Ocean 7, so there's 7 big challenge swims around the world. North Channel, Scotland to Ireland's one of them, for example. So I started mixing in this crowd, and I really enjoyed, the swimming was good, but the camaraderie, the social aspect, it was really fun, and the coach was great and had a really good disposition. And then when I was sitting after we did the relay, we raised a bit of money for charity for the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation. We were pretty happy with ourselves sitting in the bar afterwards at Dover. And there was a guy there, Mike Gregory, and another guy, Andrew Vidler from Melbourne, who were big marathon swimmers. Both had done the English Channel solo. Okay. And I know both of them today. And I think Mike Gregory looked over and he goes, I don't know why you guys are getting so excited. relay guys.
We're real men over here.
We're solo guys. You're just relay guys. And I thought, gee, yeah, let's put a bit of
That sounds like a
let's put us
challenge.
back in our box. Let's put a bit of a dampener on things. But I wouldn't mind. Maybe I can come back and do it solo. Now I've had a bit of a taste for it.
Okay. Now, for those of us, and I'll be in this bucket, swimming 100 meters can be a struggle.
Yeah.
I've done 3 triathlons, and the swimming part is by far the hardest for me.
Yeah.
You swim 10, 11, 12 hours. That seems so foreign to me. Just give us a sense of what's that like, in the sense of you're by yourself. I know you might have a team on a small boat, but you're by yourself. Do you get tired? Do you get restless? Do you get bored? Do you like what happens in that time?
Well, I think first of all, you've got to. It's like everything in life to me. You start small and you build confidence. Okay, so obviously, in a psychological terms, the relay gave me a visualization on what was involved, and if you like, a rehearsal using some psych terms on what's involved with swimming the English Channel.
Yeah.
So I had that feel then. And you go back and you start small. Okay, now I'm going to go back into training. I waited 6 or 7 years till my kids finished high school, because it's quite a lot of, can be a lot of stress on your spare time.
Yeah.
If you're supposed to be on the sports line for your kids on the weekend, marathon swimming doesn't really fit well with that.
Yeah.
So I waited till they'd finished high school. And then you start building up. You get confidence. Okay, I'm going to do a 10K, for example. Now I'm going to go to Rottnest and do that. That's 20K, which is about half the English Channel.
So Rottnest is in Western Australia.
Yep, that's a 6 or 7 hour swim. Okay. And so you just start to build up your confidence and your processes. Okay. So the marathon swimming, it's one thing to be able to swim, but I'd say that's 25% of the issue. You've got to be able to, you need to have a feeding strategy. You can't swim these distances and be out there for over 10 hours, or it can't be out there for over 3 hours without taking sustenance. So, you have bottles thrown to you on a rope or a dog leash, a retractable dog leash, into the water, and you take some sustenance, normally liquids that you can get down quickly, and then you keep swimming. So you have that.
Is it like protein shakes, that kind of thing?
Well, it could be everything from Gatorade or Milo and water. I eat flat ginger beer. Sometimes I just, to keep my stomach settled, I'd use chicken broth, for example.
And do you just turn over on your back while you're drinking that?
Yeah, you just roll over your back and you take the bottle down. Okay. I mean, people perfect that art, because the less time you muck around stopping is the less time you're out there, right? So there's an art form there. There's an art form with the support that you have and the people that you have around you. So there's a range of things that go on, plus your mental sort of approach to this. So you start to build it up bit by bit, and then at some point you have the confidence that, I can take on longer and longer things. And it's almost like you get a bit of a formula for how this works.
Okay. Now, there's an obvious question emerging in my brain is, why would you do it?
Well, I think my personality, I'm one of those weird people that I don't mind having 24 hours in a plane. Do you know? I mean, it's sort of my space. I get to reflect on things, think about life without being bothered. And swimming's always been my sort of yoga, meditation, clear the head, my space to reflect on things, as well as obviously being healthy exercise, stretching and all that, packaged in one. Okay. So I love the water. I've grown up with the water. My father used to take us to the Launceston Aquatic Centre every weekend in summer without fail, and we'd have a pie and a vanilla milkshake, and it was fun. It was always made to be fun. Yeah. And being in the water always felt like a natural, relaxing space for me.
Was your dad a swimmer?
Yeah.
What do you reckon he would think of what you're doing now?
Well, he's still going.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's 92. And he was very active right through. So he's inspirational for me. Yeah. Look, he was there when I did all this. I mean, he's very proud of those achievements.
I bet.
Yeah.
I grew up in Ireland, as you know, and the word Triple Crown in Ireland means rugby. It was the initial Ireland, England, Wales. then became the Four Crown, then became the Six Nations that we have today. The Triple Crown in your sport's very, very different.
Yeah.
Tell us what that is.
Well, there's a few Triple Crowns, but the big one is it's called the Triple Crown of Open Water Swimming. It's the English Channel. It's Catalina Island off LA to LA, which is about 34K. And then it's around Manhattan, which is about 45 kilometers. Okay. So if you do those three, you achieve a thing called the Triple Crown of Open Water Swimming.
And you have?
I did that in 2022. When I went back to do the solo to get the monkey off my back, right at that time when I was dialing up the training, I got to do the Rottnest swim, and I was sort of, lengthening out the training program, and I was getting ready for all this. COVID hit. So my English Channel booking was supposed to be 2020, then it rolled to 2021, couldn't get there on either of those years, and then finally everything opened up in 2022. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to eat heavily at the buffet, and if I can get a really solid training swim in with Catalina, that'll help me with my confidence for the English Channel. And then I thought, look, if I'm doing both of those this year, if I can get a spot on around Manhattan, which is actually, it's longer, but it's actually an easier swim.
Why is that?
Because there's currents that follow you. Okay. So I swim at about 3 k's an hour, but with around Manhattan, you're going pretty much the whole way at about 6.
That's huge difference.
Yeah, so it's a huge difference. So you get around,
and it's in your favour, obviously.
It's in your favour, and they, the pilots know how to game it. Yeah. So you get around in about 8 hours, whereas the English Channel took me 15, and I think Catalina took me 13 and a half.
Right. You did all that in 102 days.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, you are the oldest person in Australia to do that, and in the top 6 in the world, I think, to do that, which is a badge of honour as opposed to anything else.
Yeah, I don't really think of it so much like that. It was a sort of a program, and the time frame was pretty tight, but there's people that have done it a lot quicker, actually. And it's actually quite a big club. It's about 300 swimmers.
Right.
I think it's over 300 now. At the time, I think I was about 280 to do it in the world. So it is a good achievement, solid, and it's seen as something pretty major. But the really big one's the Ocean 7, and that's a club of 40.
What's involved in that?
Oh, that's the English Channel, the North Channel. It's Cook Strait in New Zealand. It's Molokai Straits in Hawaii. It's Catalina. What else have we got? We've got to Tsugaru Straits from Honshu, I think it is, to Hokkaido in Japan. So it's 7 swims worldwide that make that up.
And you're in that club?
Oh, and Gibraltar. I've got 3 of the 7. Right. So I've got my 4th coming up next year with Cook Strait.
So is there a time limit within that 7? That's just because that's huge feat.
It's just huge. And I mean, a lot of the thing, there's people go to the English Channel ready to go. They've got a boat, they've got a window, as we say. You get a window of a week generally. Yeah. And the weather just doesn't play ball. You can't swim those distances if the waves are sort of 1 or 2 meters. It's like punching a brick wall.
And I'm sure you have too, Susie Moroney, quite a famous Australian channel swimmer. Was it the Cubit? And just waiting for the weather pattern. That's right. And then I think she was in cages for a while.
That's right. Yeah. So the cage thing was quite popular in the 70s. And then I think statistically people did the numbers and realised, to be honest, the shark thing is really not a problem.
Okay. Can I bring you back to a comment you said? You said, I waited till my kids had left high school because I didn't want to interrupt my parenting, etc. Make time for yourself. What type of time is involved now in terms of the training you're doing? Like how much of your week is spent in this space, either in the water or preparing for the water?
Yeah, it's not too bad. The way I think about marathon swimming is like a long power walk. You're not sprinting. You can't sprint these things. I mean, some people, there are different levels, My level, at my age, I'm just trying to get from A to B. So what's involved? I go to the pool 4 mornings out of 5, Monday to Friday. So I have Thursdays off generally. I will swim an hour and a half from 6 till 7:30. I'll bang out about 4 to 4.5 kilometres. And so 7:30 I'm done, and then I'm going off to work or whatever it is that I'm doing for the day. On Saturday mornings, I normally go to the ocean, and that's where the longer swim comes in, and depending where I'm at in the evolution. So it's a bit like, boxers going into training camp. If I've got a big swim coming up, that bit, the Saturday swim dials up, and that will go from maybe normally a minimum for me is 10 kilometers on the Saturday, which takes about 3 to 3.5 hours. And then I'll take that up to, say, 6 hours.
Okay. Having done a little bit of swim training, I know that there's distinct hierarchies in the lanes in the pool. Like the right-hand lane is the fast swimmer. Is that where you're sitting? Are you sitting at a long lane in terms of...
No, I think the beauty, and why I still do this, why I love it, is I guess my personal test is, am I enjoying this?
Yeah.
And if I'm not enjoying it, there's no reason to do it. It's a sort of a self-test, really.
Yeah.
So we're split into 4 lanes in Sydney with Vlad Swim, which is Vlad Moravik, who I swim with, who's a fantastic long-distance swim coach. So I'm normally sit between lane 2 and 3. Okay. If I'm, I can sit quite happily either at the back of lane 3 or sort of towards the front of lane 2. Yeah. I don't go to lane 4 where all the fast guys are. But, it's a great sport because we put our togs on, we get in the water, whether you're 60 or 25, you just split based on speed. Yeah. And so, from our psychology backgrounds, Ellen Langer did the counterclockwise experiment, and where you're mixing older people or making them feel they're in a younger environment. And it's really uplifting because the young people don't want to hear about your aches and pains. No. You can't go and say, gee, the back's hurting today. They got zero interest. And, they reach out, they want help with their careers, they want help with their swims. So it's this sort of symbiotic relationship, which I think is good for everyone.
Your brother has piloted for some of your races.
Yeah.
What's that like, having your family with you, does anybody else in your family get involved?
Well, I always try wherever possible. Some people have a formula where they take the same sort of semi-professional support crews with them, who do this all the time. I tend to see this as an opportunity to bring old friends together and have a bit of fun. So, when we went to Tarifa in the south of Spain and we sat there for a week waiting for a weather window to swim across to Morocco and do the Straits of Gibraltar, you're sightseeing, you're doing a little bit of swimming each day, you're trying to get ready both physically and psychologically for the swim when it comes, but you're having fun. So to be able to do something like the Derwent River with my brother, who still lives in Tasmania, and have him bring his boat down and pilot it, was just, it was a fantastic thing to do because we were very tight growing up, but our paths have sort of,
different directions
over the years.
You and I both know a gentleman called Gordon Spence, who was on this show a few months ago, and there's 2 or 3 things he said in that show that really resonated for me, and I think they're relevant for this conversation. First thing he said is, from a midlife perspective, getting back into exercise, if you haven't exercised for a while, there's 2 things that are really important. One is the head game, i.e., why do I want to do this? But the second thing was a social connection. He said that is by far the most important thing. And what struck me about what you're saying is you light up when you're talking about your friends, the challenge. Hey, we're a relay team versus a solo team, but the solo team still has a team around me.
That's right.
Tell me more about the social connectedness as part of this, and how do you energize that part of it?
Yeah, I sort of think like we're social animals at the end of the day. Our connections are really important. Yeah. So, when I go along, that's the thing that I probably really love about the swimming community, whether I'm in Ireland or Spain or wherever I'm going for a swim, there are other long distance swimmers. It's a relatively contained community, and there's databases that you can look up who's who in the zoo, and so people. But I sit there, I go and do the swimming. I normally have a coffee before I get in the pool and have a bit of a chat. Then I go and do the swimming, and I'm, to be honest, often I'm watching the clock because I know at 7:30 I can get out and we're all going to sit around and have another yak and, a bit more social interaction. So I think that's probably the glue with this. And to your point, the whole ability to think, oh, who might like to come along with me for a trip to New Zealand, and we'll go and have a bit of fun, and they can throw me the bottles and be my, cheer squad while I'm doing this.
The other thing that Gordon said to me, which I had never heard of before, he shared some statistics around elite running. And he said, when you look at the pace for elite runners from their 20s to their 30s, so for 5 decades, he said it only starts tapering off at age 70 onwards. And his point is that we often walk ourselves into this, hey, I'm now 45 or 55 or 63 or 68, therefore I can't exercise. And he said the research shows the opposite, actually you can. You've proven this.
That's true. And it's an interesting point, because I've heard that sort of statistic about 70 being an area where a point where you have your muscle mass starts to decline and your ability to do this stuff starts to get more difficult. I'm 64 and I haven't seen anything that's affecting my ability to do this. So, I think, that's definitely the case. And I do think even with life and business and all those sort of things, people talk about ageism, and I believe that what you present and how you attack life and think about life has an effect on the people around you. So if you convince yourself that you're 50 and you're never going to get another job because you've been made redundant, or you're too old for this or whatever, you already talked yourself out of it. So I think people respond to what you present. And certainly whether it's in business or everything else, I feel I'm the same person I was at that 10-year-old boy. Yeah. Same things amuse me. Yeah. I've got more experience and I've studied more in life, but, or 30. So, it's who I am. I don't want it to invade my head. Yeah. And, we control what goes through our heads.
Yeah. Let's just pause for a second. If you've made it this far, it must mean you're enjoying the show. We want to keep bringing you awesome conversations, but algorithms are like needy toddlers. They demand constant validation. So if you're liking this, please hit the like button, the follow button, the subscribe button, whatever button. It helps us land more great guests to keep entertaining you. And if you're listening to this on an audio podcast app, come over and watch us on YouTube. I promise we're reasonably photogenic. Back to the show. I want to come back to psychology soon, because you did an interesting thing. You studied a master's degree in psychology later, but I'll come back to that. Yeah. Speaking of midlife, and you can choose to do what you do. You had a huge career in finance industry, in asset investments, etc. Very successful in a few different countries. You worked in Australia. You worked in
a lot in the US, but also Europe, UK.
And when you chose to leave that, well, first of all, why did you choose to leave that? And then my second question is, you chose to do a very different role in terms of the Monash Foundation that you're now CEO of.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a transition in life. For the first part of my life, coming out of, my teens into my 20s, I was, to be honest, very focused on my career, but also exploring the world and learning and being open to learning, and just seeing there wasn't a big plan, because, I grew up in Launceston. It just wasn't the direction or the mentoring that you get. Yeah. And none of my family had gone to university. So you sort of go...
You were the first?
Yeah, my brother and I went off to university. And so you're sort of breaking this ground. But my father had, hitchhiked around the world. He'd regaled me of all the different jobs, fun fairs in Ireland and cutting sugar beet in Scandinavia. So I grew up with these bigger than life stories about traveling the world from, my father. And so I thought, I just want to get out and see the world. And I'm going, I'm young and it doesn't really matter, I'm going to just see where the tide takes me. And that's what sort of happened. But as I sort of got deeper into it, I started to be a bit more structured, a bit more thoughtful about the career, but it became all-consuming, if you like. And I wanted to be successful. I wanted to have those recruitments of life, the house, the car, all the things that go with a little bit of success. Yeah. So, I was quite focused on that. And I didn't, even to the extent of, marriage came later in my life. I got married at 38 or so. And so very focused on that. I think as you go through and you have different successes, and we're trained for the dopamine hit, the little medal you get for winning the three-legged race at primary school, or the certificate for academic something at high school, or promotion. We're sort of trained to seek those sort of rewards. Yeah. But at some point, I think for me, it changed. And in the last job, I was there for 8 years. I had an agenda when I went in that sort of got implemented. You start to be a little bit, you're searching for ideas, and it's less exciting. And back to I'd say the psychology, Ryan and Decky have their self-determination theory, and they talk about, the CAR acronym, which is competence. Are you learning? Autonomy. How much autonomy do you have? And how strong are the relationships? And then I'd put on that, to make the fish analogy, carp, the purpose. Where's the purpose? And as I was sort of sitting there, there were some aspects of that where I was struggling with. And I thought, maybe it's time to have a break and go and just take a break, do a few things that you haven't had time to do. Yeah. And then think about what you want to do for the next part of your life. And the sort of message to self, it doesn't have to be what you did in the past. Yeah.
This whole podcast, Don't Let the Old Man In, is, if there was a word for it to sit on, it'd be reinvention. Yeah. As in, how do you, if you want to, that is, how do you reinvent your second half of life?
That's right.
If you're at a point where you go, I'm not satisfied, or I've done all this, I want to do something else, or I've been doing X and Y to support the family, now they're independent. And it sounds like you arrived at that point, it may not have been so clean as I've just said it. What was the shift from, this is not quite right now, to I need to go and do something else?
Yeah, look, I think there was, the kids had finished high school, right? And so they were off on their path to uni and independence. I'm finding that work's not as fulfilling as it had been in that role for the first, let's say, 5 years. Yeah. So I thought, I'm not stimulated. So, and I didn't want to do anything silly. Often you have there's financial rewards that come from being at certain points. So you don't want to be silly about it. But I thought, I'll go off. I need to start preparing for the next phase. Psychology has always interested me since the 1987 stock market crash. I walked in there one day, the day before, with my economics degree, and everyone's buying stocks at 2x with their ears pinned back. The next day, everything's on sale at 1x, and everyone wants to sell, and you're thinking, how does that work? So I think from that point, and, my thing in the finance industry has been more the management of the businesses and the strategic management than the investment per se. Yeah. There have been teams of investors, but I've been sitting there, running the businesses. And that's been interesting. And that takes a lot of people psychology and how you manage people and IQ versus EQ and all those sort of things. So I wanted to go back into the psychology. So I did that. And then the swimming, I was able to fit that in because of the, things opening up as well. And I'm back enjoying that. And then at some point, there was a time when I thought, okay, time for the break now, and let's see where that takes me. And there was no real plan, except obviously I could do the coaching and the mentoring because I'd gone and done the Masters of Psychology at Sydney Uni. Consulting, or I wasn't really sure, but I thought I'd just take a break to start with.
It sounds to me like what you were doing was, I'm strategically laying down pathways that I may or may not follow, but at least I give myself some optionality.
Exactly.
And so by doing the master's degree, I can learn a lot myself, or it might open doors for elsewhere, but I don't have to go down the route if I don't want to.
That's exactly right. And I was fortunately in that position at that stage of life where, that's exactly how I describe it. I was laying down optionality. And I was thinking, here's some pathways. And to be honest, education's always been a really strong interest point for me. And seeing how educating one person at a time can just be amazing in the power of changing lives, you know.
Well, what was that like going back to study, like do a master's degree? Like, what was that like for you, just to go back into a class and be part of that learning process?
Oh, it was very fulfilling. I mean, I had to, you know, it was like a project. I often think of things like a project management exercise almost. It's like the English Channel's really like, it's a project. Yeah. I'm going to go from here to there, and I've got to try and make this work. And I had to go back to Charles Sturt. I had to do Psych 101 and 102 at Charles Sturt. I just did 2 subjects. And then I packaged this up, and I hoped that I'd get into the course. And I wanted to do the master's, but I got accepted to the certificate course to start with. So I'm into it. And then, you know, chip through that, and then I can upgrade to the master's. And then so it was like a project. But the concept of being relaxed about learning, because I think when you go to university, when I went to university the first time, you felt the pressure of having to achieve a degree.
Yeah.
And sometimes with all the distractions when you're in your early 20s, you know, you sort of lose sight of the learning experience, because it's about passing exams and passing subjects. Whereas this time you sort of sit back in a relaxed way and you go, I'm going to soak up as much of this as I can. This is about the learning experience. And actually it doesn't really matter if I pass or not. But you obviously want
I
to
completely understand that, because as you know, I've just started doing a doctorate in Oxford.
Yep.
And I'm going over to Oxford 3 times a year. And I don't have to. I can go online if I want to, you know, at 4 a.m, or whatever. But for me, the reason I've decided to study this now is for me personally. I'm studying what we're talking about, men in midlife, right? So for me, this is rich learning, but I'm doing it to actually just enjoy the learning piece, because every other time I've studied in my life, I've been running a business, I've had young kids, and it's about what's the minimal amount of time required to get the outcome of an assignment result, and everything else is just I haven't got time for. And I sent a photograph to my wife in October, my first time in the university, saying, I've discovered this new room. It's called a library. Right? I've never been to one before in the university, right? Yeah. So I find men who decide to go and do something different in midlife really enjoy it, because they're doing it for themselves. Yeah. And if you're able to take the time, or if you're privileged enough to be able to be financially secure that you can do the time, it's so worth doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I bring you back to, you said you used the acronym CARP, yeah? So you're extending the word purpose at the end of the self-determination theory piece. I've always felt that purpose emerges, as opposed to purpose is like a road to Damascus, sudden flash of light. And I'm interested in your idea of you lay down various foundations to give yourself optionality. What was that emerging sense of purpose for you?
Yeah, well, look, what happened to me is that, as I said, I grew up in Launceston. I won a scholarship to go to the Launceston Grammar School. I then went to the University of Tasmania when the government, it was free university, you know, I guess the Whitlam, after the Whitlam years here. And then a company very kindly paid for me to go to Columbia University, where I did a master's. And especially the Columbia piece was life-changing. It took me from, I guess, you know, my Tasmanian background, my chippy Tasmanian background, out into a big wide world. And for that, you know, I'm forever grateful to all the people that have supported my education. So I think somewhere in there, and I lived at a residence college in New York called International House, which was a residence college for all the different institutions in New York, from Juilliard to Manhattan School of Music, Alvin
Wow,
Ailey.
that diversity would be huge.
Fantastic. And 75% of them are from around the world, the scholars. So I'd go to the business school, very serious, buttoned-down business people, a lot of Americans. And then I'd go back to International House and I'd be having dinner next to a Czech violinist and a Brazilian dancer.
Brilliant.
And it was fantastic. So that experience alongside Columbia was probably more powerful for me than the business school. And so subsequently, when I went back to New York to work, I got involved with International House, and I've been on that board of International House, which is a non-for-profit, standalone residence, quite a high-profile board in New York, and I've been on that board for 25 years, and involved with all aspects of that entity and all the students, postgraduate students. So I've loved that. And I've mentored into that, and I've done a range of things, and just that has been a really fulfilling part of my life. So, and then with the swimming, more recently, we raised money for the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation. So I got involved with that. And I guess in the evolution, I realized that, I love the idea of seeing people have some of the opportunities that I had to get educated and what that does in terms of life. And I think too, not that, I feel that I didn't have I still feel I had a privileged background growing up in Tasmania, but, you did feel like an outsider. So I think there's some
small island at the bottom of a big country.
And in those days, people made a lot of jokes about Tasmania. It's a bit cooler now. But, I sort of feel when, in the outsider or people that are a bit disadvantaged or struggling, I love Australia because, you can come here and you can be from overseas and there's pathways and there's support and the education system's very good and you can be the smart child without resources and there are ways through here. And then, really, it's once you get educated, anything can happen.
Yeah. I'm imagining your first few weeks inside International House when you were the Columbia student. It must have felt like your dad's hitchhiking all over the world was just suddenly brought to you into one place.
Yeah.
Because of all the people he met, you had them all in one building.
That's right. And, I can remember the first week there, they did there was a Spike Lee movie had come out and a couple of the African-American scholars were explaining, how New York worked and some of the background and, you're sort of in this different world. You've come from this isolated world. And as I say, the Berlin Wall was coming down when I was there. You're talking to a German student about what's happening in Europe. It was fantastic.
So you mentioned you're on the board, you do a lot of mentoring to the students, you did a psychology degree. What did you learn about yourself in terms of how you show up and how has that helped you in your long distance swimming?
Yeah, no, look, I think that, I learnt, there's quite a lot I think I learnt about myself. I think I learnt that, I'm quite stubborn. That's one thing that, when I'm on a pathway, I really like to stay the course. Most of the jobs I've had, I've been there for around 10 years. Okay. So, you learn a lot about the sort of your natural backup behaviour, how you feel, how you operate. I was quite a shy kid. I learned a lot about how you build confidence. And I think really what it was an opportunity through the psychology to do was to think about all the things you've learnt on the fly as you go through life and then compare them to the actual research and the tested research that's out there and the theories.
Yeah. You said stubborn. You said something a few minutes ago that struck me. You said, I went to the US and became very focused. I got married at 38. I thought, I wonder, are you someone who is naturally talented and maybe over-index on his talent to stay focused on something and therefore see that through? Because I'm imagining when you're in the water for 12 hours, you have to be focused because if you don't, you get drowned.
I think it's probably, I probably feel I stay in there, well, not swimming so much, but I'll stay in a role longer than probably others because I sort of feel like, yes, it takes a lot for me to be knocked off my path. even if it mightn't be perfect or working out, I'm probably still going to try and squeeze the most out of it, and hope that, I had a startup business for 10 years. We did a lot of amazing things, but at the end it didn't quite, make it. But I was there for 10 years, turning up, doing my best to make a success of it. So I do think that aspect. But you're right, with the swimming, you need all sorts of psychological tricks to keep you in the water. Because as soon as you touch the boat, if you touch the support boat,
you're finished.
You're finished.
Yeah.
It's over.
I remember watching Susie Maroney, and I think that they were trying to pull the boat away from her because she was about to try and touch it, and that she was exhausted in the water. So I remember that. Yeah, you work with amazing coaches. You mentioned Vlad and Johnny Van Wees, I think was one of your coaches.
Yeah.
Now that you're a psychologically based coach, what are you observing in watching these great coaches? Because they're brilliant swimming coaches, as I understand it.
I think the most important thing with those guys is that they keep it fun. If I look at everything they do, both of them, I go there, I chuckle, I laugh, I've got a smile on my face. Yep, I'm banging out the laps, I'm doing the kilometers, but I'm feeling happy because they're radiating fun and happiness. And they can teach you to swim, they can teach you how to cross a channel, they can do all that. But if I was to boil it down and say, what do I most enjoy about turning up to those sessions at 6 o'clock in the morning? It's the fact that they come with a very positive attitude.
Are there any parallels with that and the better or best leaders you worked with in your finance career?
Yeah, look, I think that I definitely, my father was a glass 3/4 full, if not, overfilling. So I feel that I look for those sort of people. I don't have a lot of tolerance for people that are, the negativity. It's, I just think we've got one shot, let's make the most of it.
Can I move to a topic on philanthropy?
Yeah.
This business has 8 core pillars that we think are really important from a second half of life. Career choices and reinvention being one of those. Your physical health is one of those. Philanthropy and community is one of those. You've been involved by sitting on a board, as you said, for a long time. I'm sure there's other boards you've been involved with too. As I understand it, you've raised almost $500,000 for Indigenous education and other charities through your swimming. You've now co-founded the Chilean open water swimming. You've gone back to Chile to do stuff. What benefit do you get from doing all this work? Because otherwise you wouldn't keep doing it for philosophy reasons.
I really do feel happy when I see other people, achieving goals or having fulfillment or getting educated or their careers sort of starting to move. I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. So, for example, the John Monash Foundation, where I've gone to work, I saw that job 5 years ago, and I was sitting at my desk running the investment management business, and I thought, gee, if I was in a different place, I'd have a red hot go at that, And when I did finish up in the investment management industry and took some time out, I came back to Australia in March this year, and I was literally in a cafe. I wasn't plugged into any of the financial stuff, and I was flicking through the AFR, and there was the ad again. And I took a photo of it, and I went to a lunch, and I was talking for the actual Indigenous Education Foundation lunch for their, and I'd never been before because I've been busy or traveling. So I go to this, I'm talking to the guy that runs it. He said, what are you going to do now you're back? And I said, I'm not sure. I'm still trying to work it out. Nothing's really grabbing me. But I did see this. And, so I rang. Suddenly, he knew the chair, and I'm talking to the chair, and she said, put your hat in the ring. We've got a search process. And I thought, wow. And when you have that gut feeling of excitement.
Yeah.
And I had it. I slept on it. I wake up next day, still excited. Yeah. A couple of days later, still excited. I get deeper into the process. They offer me the job, still excited. I've been doing it for 6 months, still excited. I just feel like very lucky to have this opportunity to do something which really helps young Australians get postgraduate degrees. And when I looked at all the things I've done in a disparate way over my life, I can this brings them all together. So it's sort of perfect at this stage of my life.
And the Monash Foundation is similar to the Rhodes Scholarship idea, i.e. you give postgraduate scholarships.
It's really the Rhodes Scholarship or the Fulbright for Australians by Australians. So you've got from the federal government, state governments, corporations, BHP, Wesfarmers, CBA, down to foundations, individuals, all come together, and we send off 18 young Australians. We don't have an age limit. Rhodes has 26. Generally ours can be from early 20s to late 30s, and they can go anywhere in the world. They've got to have a plan, and we fund them up to $100,000 a year for up to 3 years for a PhD. You get $300,000, and off they go, mainly to Oxford, Cambridge, the Ivy Leagues, MIT, Stanford, but also, universities in Europe, around the world. So, and it's for Impact for Australia. So, over 60% are back in Australia now, doing some amazing things from education to medical to public policy to law, but all in the spirit of a great Australian, John Monash.
I'm slightly over 30, otherwise I'd be applying for that myself, but it's fantastic you're doing so. And the thing I love about that is your experience of working in the US and going to Columbia expanded your mind hugely. These folks will go back as well. They'll expand their mind's experience and bring that back to
That's
Australia.
right. We want them to go off, we've got great institutions here. They've all pretty much gone through the Australian university system undergrad. Go off, internationally, make connections, do some work, cut your teeth in the international markets, and then look to bring that back for the benefit of Australia.
Yeah, and having had a great time in the process.
That's right.
Yeah. What matters to you now in your mid-60s that was different to when you were in your 30s or 40s?
Well, look, I think in my 30s or my 20s, you're trying to find your way in life. There's certainly, you're trying to build confidence. Well, you're trying to have some success along the way that builds confidence. Trying to, it's a bit like I said, trying to get the little medals or the certificates that tell you that you're on the right path. Yeah. And, I sort of feel now that, to be honest, as I get older, I've achieved the things that I probably set out. Well, I didn't really set out to achieve them, but when I look back on the life that I've had to this point, I feel very fortunate. And I always say, if someone had put that contract in front of me as a kid in Tasmania, I would have grabbed that pen and signed that, and off I would have gone. Yeah. So it's just a chance now to, really be relaxed about what you do. I sort of, again, I don't care too much about what other people think, and I try and manage my own sort of thought processes to, eliminate negative things and just focus on positive things. I sort of feel very strongly that, as I've said earlier, we get one shot, and you want to make it the best that you can.
Is that what maintains your sense of drive? Because clearly you're very, very energetic.
Well, I sort of feel like what I think maintains my drive is a desire to learn and be stimulated. I think that's always been the case, whether it was getting on that plane and going overseas to London at 21 on spec without a job and just launching myself into the big wide world, or, studying languages or doing different, flirting with music. It's just, or the psychology degree, it's being stimulated. I want to think back to the carp, am I learning? Am I being stimulated? And that's a really good test for me. And if you're not, and it's not always the case that you can do something about it, because you might be up to your eyeballs in mortgages and young kids and education, and it's just not the time to be thinking about changing jobs, and you just need to hang in there and make sure everything's secure. But if you're not passing those sort of tests, for me, that's like, I know it. You know, am I just, you know, making up the numbers, or am I just going through the motions?
Yeah.
Because if that's how I feel,
Yeah.
there's only one person that's responsible for
That's
that.
exactly right. It's you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that last point is really important. You don't need to make rash decisions. In fact, you shouldn't make rash decisions if your family's financial security is depending on you. And therefore you have to, you know, work through the logistics of that. But that doesn't stop you learning or doing different things. It just stops you changing your job.
Yeah, that's right.
Ross, you're very inspiring in many, many ways, and I'm glad we were introduced through our mutual friends over at Sydney University. Thanks for joining us today. I've got one last question for you. Actually, I've got two last questions for you. What do you think the 75-year-old version of you would be asking of you?
Well, I think I'm hoping that 70-year-old barrier isn't a real barrier of decline. I'm hoping that I just accelerate through that, and the 75-year-old is still enjoying, exploring, and having fun, and hopefully being able to pass some wisdom or some help on to others. So that's how I sort of feel about it. I just think, you know, the cliche age is a number, but I'm hoping that physically I hang together and I can just be, you know, living this life.
Brilliant. And what are your final words of wisdom for our listener today?
Well, I think, you know, the things that I would say is that, you know, life, it ain't a test run. You know, we're here. We know the actuarial tables don't lie. We know what's going to happen to us at some point. So just give it your best shot. And if you've got the ability to, you know, make change and you're not enjoying yourself and you're not happy, I think try and think of ways of affecting that change to try and get into a better place. So, you know, that's really what I'd lay out there.
On that note, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Pod. Thank you very much.
As I listened to Ross share his journey, several themes emerged that deserve deeper reflection. They aren't just interesting ideas. I think they're principles that could fundamentally shift how you and I approach the second half of our life. I've got 8 small reflections and 1 practical experiment. The first one is the wisdom of walking away. The notion that self-awareness can trump external pressure, even as a 10-year-old. His decision to retire from competitive swimming at age 10, I think that's an irony when they say that at age 10, it does reveal something profound about self-knowledge. Even then, he recognized the difference between what others wanted for him and what he wanted for himself. The 5 o'clock wake-up call, the cold Tasmanian mornings, the physical demands of competing against older, stronger kids. He didn't experience this as character building. He said it was soul crushing for himself as a 10-year-old. But he didn't give up swimming. He just gave up competing at that level. Now, what strikes me is that this wasn't burnout in a conventional sense at all. He was actually quite clear-eyed. I don't want to do this anymore. And critically, he had a father who heard him. They agreed he'd step back, but he would maintain enough engagement to swim for his high school. Now, I think this is a masterclass in finding the middle path. It's not complete abandonment, but he maintained a sustainable relationship with something that he did love. And as we found out, he returned to in abundance much later. My second reflection is how he built confidence through incremental challenges. When he decided to attempt a solo crossing of the English Channel, he didn't just dive in. He built methodically his confidence through graduated challenges. First, competing as a relay team gave him a visualization and a sense of rehearsal of what was involved. And then he waited a number of years until his kids finished high school because he acknowledged that the idea of doing it by himself would need to fit around his other responsibilities and take up a lot of time. So he progressed deliberately. He did a 10-kilometer swim. Then the Rottnest was swim outside of Western Australia, which is 20 kilometres. That was half of the English Channel distance, i.e. he gradually built up his capacity and psychological readiness. I think he explained it beautifully when he said, you start small and you build confidence each time. This incremental approach applies far, far beyond swimming. For those of us who are contemplating a career change or starting a business or taking on any significant challenge in midlife, the principle is start small, build competence, stack confidence, and then success comes. My third reflection is this common theme that keeps coming up in this podcast with our guests, and that is that social connectedness is the primary driver of physical fitness, not the physical training itself. This connects directly with what Gordon Spence shared with us a couple of months ago when he emphasized that social connection is the most important factor in sustaining exercise habits in midlife. Ross agreed completely. He said from his swimming squad, the swimming was good, but the camaraderie, the social aspect, that was the fun part. If you were watching the video of this podcast, you would have seen him light up visually when he's describing the pre-swim coffee chats, the post-training conversations, the international network of marathon swimmers that he has met all over the world who are now his friends. He said that he explicitly watched the clock during training, knowing that at 7:30, we're all going to sit around and have a yak, i.e. we're out of the pool and we're enjoying each other's company. The swimming itself was almost secondary to the community aspect of it. And even though he became a guest for the show because of the swimming that he did, it's actually the community aspect that aligns with him most. I think this is really worth listening to because it aligns perfectly with longevity research that shows social connection is one of the strongest predictions of healthy aging. Ross has found a vehicle. For him, it's marathon swimming. For you, it could be something completely different. But it delivers physical challenges and deep social engagement. The question for each of us is what vehicle serves both purposes in our own lives? My fourth reflection is psychology. The psychology of endurance. Like some of the tricks that Ross shared for staying in the water for 12 to 15 hours, he shared with us it wasn't primarily a physical challenge. It's a psychological one. It's a mind game. Start in the head before we're in the body. Ross emphasized that marathon swimming requires all sorts of psychological tricks to keep you in the water. Now, the stakes are clearly absolute. As soon as you touch the boat, that's your support boat, even once, your swimming is over. You're disqualified. Everything you've trained for is nullified by a single moment of weakness. But he compared swimming to a long power walk. It's not sprinting. It's consistently moving from point A to point B. And I found for me, listening to him, this reframe was quite crucial. He's not trying to be the fastest in the water. He's trying to finish. At 64, his goal is to complete the distance. So even though he's competing, his actual goal is focus on completing. And this acceptance of his own pace, his own level, removes the burden of competing with, say, younger swimmers, even though he is still in the top 300 in the world. And I think this is mastery. It's mastering your own orientation, mastering your own mindset. The challenge is internal. He's mastering himself and challenging himself against his own standards, not necessarily external benchmarks. And the beauty of this is when we hit midlife is we don't need to compare ourselves to external benchmarks. We compare ourselves to our own standards. Which leads me to my fifth reflection, and that is age is not a number. Ross referenced a study from Ellen Langer, which she did a study that's quite famous called the counterclockwise experiment, where older adults were immersed in an environment designed to make them feel younger. She created environments physically like the environments that they would have grown up in their 20s and 30s. And these folks who were now in their 80s, mostly men, showed physical improvements as a result of being in an environment that reminded them of when they were younger. Ross's swimming squad embodies this principle naturally. When you're in the pool, whether you're 25 or 60, you're simply sorted by speed. Age is irrelevant. I loved what he said about the conversations that occur in the pool. He said the young people don't want to hear about my aches and pains. They've got zero interest, but they do want career advice, help with their swimming, mentorship. He said it creates a symbiotic relationship where older swimmers cannot indulge in age-related complaints and younger swimmers benefit from wisdom and experience. He also mentioned research showing that elite athletic performance often tapers off around 70. At 64, he tells us, he hasn't seen anything that's affecting his ability to do this. His physical capacity remains strong despite his age, and because he's refused to accept age as a limiting factor as part of his identity. And my last reflection here is what I've called the one-shot philosophy. Optimism is a deliberate practice. Perhaps the most powerful theme running through Ross's story is his commitment to optimism, not naive positivity, but as a conscious decision about where he wants to direct limited mental energy. He said to us his father was a glass 3/4 full, if not overflowing, and Ross has inherited and chosen this orientation. I don't have a lot of tolerance for people with negativity, he said. I just think we've got one shot. Let's make the most of the one shot that we have. Now, for me, this is not about denying reality or avoiding difficult emotions. It's about choosing where are you putting your attention and what deserves my attention. As he approaches 65, Ross is clear. He says, I try to manage my own thought processes to eliminate negative things and just focus on the positive ones. I loved his final words of wisdom because I think it encapsulates his overall philosophy. Life ain't a test run. We are here. We know the actuarial tables don't lie. We know what's going to happen to us at some point. We will die. So just give it our best shot. I don't think this is morbid. I think it's liberating. The finite nature of life becomes permission to act, not an excuse for paralysis. Okay, here's the experiment that I'm going to call your gut feeling audit. Ross's story about seeing the Monash Foundation ad for the CEO role twice, 5 years apart, highlights the importance of paying attention to that gut feeling of excitement. So here's the experiment for the next couple of weeks. Keep a simple daily log with just 2 questions. First question is, what gave me today a sense of excitement? It could be an article I read, it could be a conversation, it could be working on a project, it could be seeing something on TV, but what was it that gave me a sense of excitement? The second question is, what drained my energy or made me feel tired or inferior in any way? And over the next couple of weeks, just record them. Don't judge them, don't analyze them, just record them. And after 1 month, just notice what's in each column. That will give you clues as to what you can stop doing, delete from your life, and what you might move towards, i.e. the excitements, or start being proactive in terms of, I want to go and find out more about this. Ross's story reminds us that the second half of life is not about managing decline, it's about deliberate expansion. Whether you're swimming the English Channel or simply showing up for morning coffee with your friends, the question remains the same. Are you giving it your best shot? Until next time, don't let the old man in.